Remember that time you left your ice cream on the counter and it turned into a melty mess? Well, that's kind of what happened to the US economy, except instead of the summer sun, it was China hitting the freeze button on investing in America. Yeah, freeze like your computer when it's had enough. No more sweet, sweet Chinese money flowing into our businesses. And who can blame them? See, back in 2016, China was throwing around cash in America like it was monopoly money. We're talking $46 billion worth. Fast forward to now, and they're barely tossing us a dime. We're talking a pathetic $2.3 billion in 2024. And now, zilch, nada. This wasn't some random tantrum, though. China's playing the long game, strategically redirecting their cash to places that don't make them want to pull their hair out. And let's be honest, with the way things are going in the US, can you blame them for looking for greener pastures? The problem is America got used to that Chinese cash infusion. It was like getting a birthday check from your grandma every year. You start to count on it. But now grandma's cut us off and our economy's looking a little rough. You know that saying, don't start a fight you can't finish? Well, someone should have stitched that onto a throw pillow for the Oval Office. Because when it comes to trade, Trump picked a fight with China, and boy did it backfire. Remember those tariffs? You know, those extra taxes on stuff we buy from China. Trump slapped those on everything from iPhones to those socks you could never have enough of. His thinking? Make Chinese goods more expensive so Americans would buy American-made instead. Solid plan, except for one tiny problem. It blew up in our faces. First off, China's not exactly known for just taking a punch. They hit back with their own tariffs on American goods. And not just a little love tap, we're talking a full-on haymaker. Suddenly, American businesses trying to sell their stuff to China were stuck with huge extra costs. Remember Hartwell Tech? Used to be a big deal. Well, they lost a cool $180 million overnight thanks to this trade war. And to stay afloat, they had to take out those emergency loans with interest rates so high they'd make a loan shark blush. Here's the thing about trade wars. Nobody wins. And in this one, it's American businesses and US regular folks getting clobbered. Remember those Intel factories they were supposed to build in Ohio, bringing tons of jobs? Yeah, about that, those plans are gathering dust because, surprise, surprise, they relied on Chinese funding. Now, those factories are about as lively as a graveyard at midnight. And it's not just tech taking a hit. Drive past any American factory these days, and you'll see more tumbleweeds than workers. A whopping 62% of them are strapped for cash, and millions of jobs are hanging by a thread. Remember that feeling of dread when you see the gas prices going up? Well, get used to it, because with fewer American-made goods available, everything's getting pricier. Those tariffs Trump slapped on Chinese goods? Yeah, those costs are trickling down to us faster than you can say supply chain disruption. The average American family is now shelling out an extra $1,950 every year just to buy the same stuff. We're talking groceries, clothes, that giant foam finger you always wanted. It's all costing more. Section 4, Wall Street weeping stocks crash as confidence crumbles. Remember that feeling when you check your bank account after a weekend of fun and realize you spent way too much? Well, imagine that feeling, but multiply it by like 1 billion. That's what's happening on Wall Street right now. The stock market, that fancy casino where rich people gamble with our future, is having a meltdown of epic proportions. We're not talking about some minor dip, folks. This is a full-blown crash. In just 48 hours, the market lost a mind-boggling $6.4 trillion. That's more money than most of us will ever see in our lifetimes. And it vanished faster than a plate of cookies at a Weight Watchers meeting. And the worst part, this isn't just some abstract number that only affects Wall Street fat cats. It's hitting us regular folks right in the 401k. Remember those retirement savings you've been diligently putting away? Yeah, those took a serious hit. So that dream of retiring early and buying a beachfront condo, you might want to hold off on that. Section 5, Main Street in the crosshairs, from iPhones to insulin, prices soar. Remember that time you went to the grocery store and came out with 2 bags of groceries, but felt like you spent your entire paycheck? Yeah, that's everyday life now, thanks to Trump's trade war. And it's not just the little things, folks. We're talking about essentials, the stuff we need to survive. Take cars, for example. Trump slapped a hefty 25% tariff on all those shiny new foreign cars. Now you might be thinking, well, good, support American-made. But here's the catch. We import over 6 million cars every year, and those tariffs, they're making your dream car about as attainable as a pet unicorn. And don't even get me started on pharmaceuticals. We're talking about life-saving medication here, and a whopping 72% of the ingredients used to make them come from overseas, mostly from China. So, guess what happened when Trump put tariffs on those imports? You guessed it, the price of medications skyrocketed. So, if you're one of the millions of Americans who rely on medication, get ready to dig deeper into your pockets, because staying healthy just got a whole lot more expensive. Section 6 hash Trump economy. America speaks out against tariff turmoil. Here's a news flash. Americans are pissed, like really, really pissed. And they're not just grumbling about it over their overpriced coffee. They're taking to the streets, they're flooding social media, and they're letting their voices be heard. Remember those protests happening in all the major cities? Yeah, those are about this. People are fed up with the economic turmoil, the skyrocketing prices, and the empty promises. They're holding up signs, chanting slogans, and making it very clear that they're not going to take it anymore. And then there's social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. They're all blowing up with hashtags like #TrumpEconomy, #tariff-turmoil, and #make prices affordable again. People are sharing their stories about how these tariffs are hurting them, their families, and their businesses. They're calling out Trump's economic policies for the disaster they are. Even Trump's billionaire buddy Warren Buffett is publicly criticizing these tariffs, saying they're hurting working families and businesses. And when Warren Buffett thinks you've gone too far, you've messed up big time. So what's the solution? Honestly, it's anyone's guess at this point, but one thing's for sure. America needs a leader who understands how the economy actually works. Someone who can clean up this mess and get us back on track, because right now we're on a runaway train to economic disaster, and the conductor seems to have no idea how to hit the brakes. Folks, we've got a problem, and it's not just the president's Twitter feed, though that's a whole other episode. We're talking about our reliance on foreign countries, especially China, for our medicine. Yes, you heard right, the pills you pop, the stuff that keeps you alive, and a lot of it's made overseas. Now, there's nothing wrong with a bit of global trade, but when it comes to essential medicines, relying on another country is like giving them the keys to your medicine cabinet. They could jack up the prices, or worse, cut off the supply altogether. And guess what? They know it. This dependence hits hard, especially for seniors, folks with chronic conditions, and anyone struggling to make ends meet. Imagine having to choose between paying rent and affording your medication. That's the reality for many Americans. And what's the president's solution? He's basically shrugged and said it'll sort itself out. That's about as reassuring as a band-aid on a broken leg. This isn't just about economics, it's about public health, national security, and basic human decency. It's time we stop treating it like an afterthought. Remember that time you accidentally replied all to an email with a juicy secret? Well, imagine that, but instead of your office gossip, it's top-secret military plans. Oh, and instead of your co-workers, it's potentially hostile foreign powers who now have access to them. Congratulations, you've just recreated Signalgate. This isn't some Tom Clancy novel, folks. This actually happened. High-ranking officials were reportedly sharing sensitive military information on unsecured group chats. Leaked messages revealed specific military actions, potentially violating the Espionage Act and putting our national security at risk. But did this administration take responsibility? Did they launch a full-scale investigation? Of course not. Instead, the president defended an individual named Hexath, yes, you heard that right, Hexath, and dismissed the whole thing as another witch hunt. This isn't a joke, people. This is serious business. Leaking classified information puts lives at risk. It undermines our intelligence agencies, and it makes us look about as trustworthy as a used car salesman with a permanent wink. This isn't about politics. It's about protecting our country and the people who serve it. Fasten your seatbelts, folks, because the U.S. economy is on a wild ride thanks to the president's unpredictable policies. 1 minute, he's all about tariffs, slapping them on everything but the kitchen sink. The next, he's rambling about whales and coal like some kind of energy-obsessed Captain Ahab. It's enough to make your head spin faster than a wind turbine. This mixed messaging creates chaos in the market. Businesses don't know what to expect. Investors get spooked and the economy takes a hit. We're talking about a potential recession, folks. Experts predict our GDP could shrink by as much as 3% this quarter. That's a far cry from the steady growth we saw under the previous administration. But hey, at least we're bringing back coal, right? Never mind that it's a dying industry, polluting our air and accelerating climate change. Who needs clean energy and a sustainable future when you can have black lung and rising sea levels? It's all part of the president's master plan. Or maybe it's just another impulsive decision based on nostalgia and a desire to please his base. Either way, the American economy and the planet are paying the price. Hey there, America. It's your friendly neighborhood British comedian here, back to explain another baffling political situation. This time, it's about electricity and tariffs and Canada. Get ready, because it's about to get shocking. In a move that can only be described as a power move, Ontario, Canada has slapped a 25% tariff on electricity exports to the US. That's right, folks. Those friendly Canadians are hitting us where it hurts, our wallets, and our ability to turn on the lights. This tariff is no joke. We're talking about 1.5 million American homes and businesses directly affected. That's a lot of people suddenly facing higher electricity bills, and a lot of businesses wondering if they can keep the lights on. And this isn't just some abstract economic policy debate. This is about real people's lives, people like you and me who rely on electricity to power our homes, our businesses, and our lives. So how badly is this tariff going to hurt? Well, let's break it down. The average household affected by this tariff can expect to see their electricity bill jump by about $100 a month. Now, that might not sound like much to some, but for many American families already struggling to make ends meet, it's a significant blow. And it's not just households feeling the pinch. Businesses, especially energy-intensive industries like manufacturing, are getting hit hard. We're talking about potential factory closures, job losses, and a ripple effect that could be felt throughout the economy. Remember those states we talked about earlier? New York, Michigan, Minnesota. Yeah, they're feeling the brunt of this tariff. These states rely heavily on Canadian electricity imports, and this tariff is throwing a wrench into their energy plans. This isn't just about a few extra dollars on your electricity bill. This is about the economic security of millions of Americans. This situation has the potential to snowball into a full-blown energy crisis, and nobody wants that, except maybe those who invested heavily in candles and generators. Here's the thing. When energy prices go up, everything else tends to follow. Manufacturing costs rise, transportation costs rise, and suddenly that gallon of milk and that new phone you've been eyeing are significantly more expensive. We're already seeing warnings of potential blackouts and brownouts, especially during peak demand periods. Imagine a hot summer day, the air conditioning goes out, and millions of people are left sweating in the dark. Not exactly a recipe for a happy and productive society, and let's not forget about the environmental impact. As the US scrambles to find alternative energy sources, we might see a greater reliance on fossil fuels, which is bad news for the planet. This is a classic case of a seemingly small issue with the potential to create massive, far-reaching consequences. Section 4, the political chessboard, Canada's stance and upcoming elections. So, why is Canada doing this? Well, to understand that, we need to put on our political analyst hats and delve into the complex world of international trade disputes. You see, this electricity tariff isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of a larger trade war that's been brewing between the US and Canada for years. It all started with the US imposing tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. Canada retaliated with tariffs of its own, and things have been escalating ever since. Adding fuel to the fire, Canada has a federal election coming up. And let me tell you, using tariffs as a political tool is a tale as old as time. The current frontrunner, Mark Carney, has made it clear that he's not afraid to stand up to the US and protect Canadian interests. This electricity tariff is a shot across the bow, a way for Canada to say we're not going to be pushed around, but it's a risky move, one that could backfire if the US decides to retaliate with even harsher measures. It's a game of chicken, with the economic well-being of millions hanging in the balance. Section 5. Flipping the switch, the feasibility of an electricity cutoff. Now, some of you might be thinking, can't Canada just turn off the lights completely? And the answer is, well, it's complicated. You see, the US and Canada share a vast and interconnected power grid. It's like a giant electrical circulatory system with electricity flowing back and forth across the border. So, completely cutting off the flow of electricity isn't as simple as flipping a switch. It would be more like trying to perform open heart surgery while the patient is running a marathon. That being said, Canada could still make things very difficult for the US. They could reduce the amount of electricity they export, or they could jack up the prices even higher, and that would leave the US scrambling to find alternative energy sources, which, as we discussed earlier, could have its own set of problems. So, while a complete blackout is unlikely, it's not entirely off the table. And that uncertainty is just adding to the tension and anxiety surrounding this whole situation. It's a high-stakes game of brinkmanship, and right now it's anyone's guess who's going to blink first. Hold on to your hats, folks, because we're diving headfirst into the maelstrom of Trump's 2025 policies. It's a chaotic mix of economic gambles, territorial power plays, and administrative shake-ups that have left even the most seasoned political analysts scratching their heads. From energy crises to international incidents, the man thrives on chaos. But beneath the surface of headline-grabbing pronouncements lies a deeper story, one with potentially dire consequences for the future of America. Remember when Trump promised to make America great again? Well, buckle up, because this ain't your grandma's MAGA. This time around, it's a high-stakes game of chicken with global powers, a blatant disregard for the rule of law, and an unhealthy obsession with Elon Musk. And the American people, they're caught in the crossfire. Over the next few sections, we'll unpack the most significant developments of Trump's recent political maneuvering. We'll examine the potential fallout from his aggressive trade policies, his controversial appointments, and his administration's unwavering commitment to budget cuts. And we'll explore how these decisions might shape the political landscape as we hurtle towards the next election cycle. Fasten your seatbelts, everyone. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Remember that whole America First thing? Well, it turns out it applies to energy too, even if it means throwing our northern neighbours under the bus. Trump, in his infinite wisdom, has decided to slap tariffs on Canadian oil imports, a decision that has experts warning of a potential energy crisis. See, the United States relies on Canada for a good chunk of its oil. We're talking 1.4 million barrels a day. But Trump, with his signature disregard for expert opinions, seems to think that tariffs are the answer to everything. He's dismissed concerns about Canada retaliating by cutting off electricity, even though that could plunge parts of the Northeast into darkness. The White House, in a move that surprised absolutely no one, has threatened to retaliate with even more tariffs if Canada dares to fight back. Meanwhile, folks in the Northeast are bracing for the worst potential blackouts, skyrocketing electricity prices, and factories grinding to a halt. Some experts are saying that a complete energy shutdown is unlikely, but that a gradual reduction in supply is a real possibility. But hey, who needs a reliable energy grid when you can have a trade war with your biggest trading partner? Remember all those promises about ending inflation and giving the American worker a much-needed raise? Yeah, about that. Trump's economic policies seem to be doing the exact opposite of what he promised. Inflation is still on the rise, the stock market is in freefall, and the cost of basic necessities is through the roof. It seems that starting a trade war with half the world wasn't the economic silver bullet Trump thought it would be. Experts are pointing the finger at his tariffs for driving up prices and creating uncertainty in the market, and let's not forget about those massive tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy. Turns out trickle-down economics is just as effective as a screen door on a submarine. The stock market certainly isn't impressed. It plunged a record 1,300 points the same week Trump announced his latest round of reciprocal tariffs. Meanwhile, ordinary Americans are struggling to put food on the table and gas in their cars. But hey, at least the billionaires are doing great, right? It seems that Trump's ambitions aren't limited to just making America great again. He's also got his sights set on expanding its borders. That's right, folks. The man who once suggested we buy Greenland is at it again, this time with a renewed interest in acquiring the Panama Canal. Unsurprisingly, the international community is less than thrilled about Trump's imperial ambitions. Denmark, which currently has sovereignty over Greenland, called his proposal absurd. And Panama, understandably, wasn't too keen on the idea of the United States just waltzing in and taking control of their most important asset. They condemned Trump's remarks as a violation of their sovereignty. But does Trump care about international law or respecting the sovereignty of other nations? Of course not. He's like a bull in a china shop, except the china shop is the entire world and the bull is wearing a MAGA hat. Section 5. The Musk dynasty Starlink and the rise of an unofficial VP. Trump has always had a talent for surrounding himself with colourful characters, but his latest BFF takes the cake. That's right, we're talking about Elon Musk, the billionaire tech mogul who has somehow become the unofficial vice president of the United States. It all started with Trump's promise to drain the swamp and dismantle the bureaucracy. But instead of actually reducing the size of government, he's just handed over the keys to his buddies in the private sector. Case in point. Starlink, Musk's satellite internet company, has been awarded a massive government contract, effectively giving Musk unprecedented influence over US infrastructure. Musk is now the head of the newly formed Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, a move that has many wondering if Trump is just trolling us at this point. With his newfound power, Musk is essentially calling the shots on everything from space exploration to internet access. It's enough to make you wonder who's really running the show in Washington. Is it the President of the United States, or is it the guy who once sent a car into space? Section 6. The people versus the GOP budget cuts spark outrage and town hall exoduses. While Trump and his cronies are busy playing space cowboys and carving up the globe, the American people are facing the very real consequences of their actions. The Republican-led Congress has been on a budget-cutting spree, slashing funding for essential programs like healthcare, education, and veterans benefits. The reaction from the public has been swift and furious. Republican town halls across the country have been met with outrage as constituents confront their elected officials about the devastating impact of these cuts. The GOP, clearly unprepared for the level of anger and frustration, has reportedly advised its members to avoid town halls altogether. Republicans are trying to justify the cuts as necessary for fiscal responsibility, but it's clear that they're more interested in lining the pockets of their wealthy donors than in helping ordinary Americans. The cuts are hitting the working class the hardest, leaving many struggling to afford basic necessities. Even the GOP's own Vice President, J.D. Vance, isn't safe from the public's ire. He's faced protests while on vacation, a clear sign that the American people are fed up with the GOP's agenda. Section 7. Supreme Court showdowns defiance in the case of Kilmar Abreu Garcia. Remember that whole checks and balances thing they teach you in school? Yeah, Trump doesn't seem to remember that part. He's been on a collision course with the Supreme Court, even going so far as to defy a unanimous ruling in a recent case involving a deported migrant. The case involved Kilmar Abreu Garcia, a man who was deported despite having a strong claim to US citizenship. The Supreme Court ruled 9-0 in favor of Garcia's return, but the Trump administration simply ignored the ruling. They falsely claimed that the court had ruled in their favor and even went so far as to label Garcia a gang member. El Salvador, Garcia's home country, refused to take him back, leaving the man in limbo. The Trump administration's blatant disregard for the rule of law is deeply troubling and sets a dangerous precedent for the future. Section 8. A divided Congress, pushing through a controversial agenda. Despite facing opposition from the public, the courts, and even members of their own party, the Trump administration has managed to push through a significant portion of its agenda. On April 11, 2025, Congress approved legislation enacting key elements of Trump's platform, including controversial changes to taxes, energy, and immigration. The legislation passed largely along party lines, highlighting the deep divisions that continue to plague American politics. While the administration is touting the legislation as a victory, critics argue that it will primarily benefit the wealthy and powerful, leaving the working class behind. Section 9. Election Countdown. The political fallout of Trump's bold moves. As we hurtle towards the next election cycle, it's clear that the political landscape has been irrevocably altered by Trump's tumultuous first year back in office. His aggressive policies, controversial appointments, and blatant disregard for the rule of law have left the country deeply divided. The budget cuts, while popular with fiscal conservatives, have alienated many working-class voters, a demographic that Trump will need to win over if he hopes to secure a second term. Meanwhile, his territorial ambitions and cozy relationship with Elon Musk have raised concerns among voters across the political spectrum. The upcoming elections will be a referendum on Trump's presidency and a test of whether the American people are willing to tolerate his brand of chaotic, self-serving leadership. One thing is for sure, the stakes have never been higher.